We heard a wonderful presentation earlier today from a colleague and friend, Dr. Yael Ziegler, about the structure of Megillat Eichah. I'm going to take a different approach to the structure from perspective of the function of Megillat Eichah. And to be honest, approximately half of the shiur is going to be of an introductory nature and of a general nature, issues relating to Tanakh and functions of different parts of Tanakh. If I were to ask you, what is Tanakh? What a broad question. What would you answer? What is Tanakh?
Written literature of the Jewish people upon which we can learn to live our lives.
Okay, good. Put that on a sampler. What kind of material is Tanakh? So you're stymied. You're stymied, first of all, because you've never had to think about it. You've never been asked the question. That's okay. I make sure to ask the question only once in each place. Is Tanakh history?
No.
Is
All of the above.
all the above? There's only one above. Is Tanakh history? Is Tanakh prophecy? Is Tanakh poetry? Is Tanakh elegy? Tanakh observation? Is Tanakh wisdom? Now you could say all of the above. And more. So when we look at a particular book of Tanakh, and this is misleading, the first question we want to ask when opening that book is, what kind of book is this? I say it's misleading because a particular book will likely include more than one genre of literature. Let's take as an example a book with which we are all very familiar. Not nearly as familiar as we think we are, which is Sefer Bereshit. What is Sefer Bereshit? What would you assign it? What kind of literature is Bereshit? History, right? It's history. Problem is, what do you do with perek Memtet in Bereshit, in which Yaakov is speaking to his sons around his deathbed? It's not exactly history. It's poetry. It's well-wishing. It's prophecy. What would you do with the line in perek Lament Gimel? Al Kain lo yachlu b'nei Yisrael gidan Hashem. There's law. That's why I said it's a little misleading to speak about the genre of a particular book. However, there are books which are, almost every book is overwhelmingly of one genre or another. Bereshit is almost all narrative, all story. What is Vayikra? Law. Vayikra is almost entirely law. Only two little stories in Vayikra and then the Tochacha. Bamidbar is a very healthy mix. Narrative, some poetry, a lot of law. Dvarim is a whole genre by itself. It's the rebuke, the speech. And it's got poetry, and it's got brit. But most of Tanakh we would divide into either being narrative, law, or poetry. And the poetry itself we would typically divide into prophetic poetry and prayerful poetry. What book, as an example, is a book of of prophetic poetry? Yeshayahu, good example. A little bit of narrative in there, mainly prophetic poetry. What is a great example of a book that is filled with prayerful poetry? Tehillim. Beautiful. By the way, is all of Tehillim prayer? Almost all of it is. But there are a few perek Tehillim that also violate that rule. Ashrei ha'isha asher olah lach b'tzad rishayim. It's not a prayer. It's an observation. What we call Safrut HaChochma, wisdom literature. And so the books are mixed together. There are two books in Tanakh that stand out as being somewhat pure in their genre. And it's a genre that doesn't seem to exist anywhere else. It's a genre that I'd like to refer to as expressive literature. One of them is Shir HaShirim. Briefly, what is Shir HaShirim? Not a long piece, but just what is Shir HaShirim? It is love songs from the mouth of the actors. It's not an observer describing lovers running after each other and keep missing each other, which is why, by the way, what happens throughout the Shir HaShirim. Never seem to meet. But it is the lovers themselves expressing their longing, their desire, their imagination, their fantasies, what they're afraid of, what they're hoping will happen, and speaking to their friends. Hishpati etchem benot Yerushalayim. Don't push it. It's not time. And there's another book, which is an expressive book, which perhaps we could suggest sits on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, and that is Eicha. Eicha is a book which expresses very opposite kind of feelings of tragedy, of desolation, of churban. But Eicha itself serves a function which cannot be realized until we get to the last chapter, which is why our focus is going to be on the last chapter of Eicha. Among the 5 Megillot within our common custom, Eicha has several components of it which are unique in our practice. We'll talk about the primary Megillah, the one that is just called HaMegillah. It's called Megillat Esther. When is Megillat Esther read? On Purim. When on Purim? So chiefly during the day. If you take a look at the Sugya at the beginning of Masachet Megillah and the Rishonim there, you'll see that the main reading is clearly the day reading. As a matter of fact, it's very unclear whether there even was a night reading at the time of the Tanaim. Seems that there wasn't. Daytime reading. When is Shir HaShirim read? I know we read it all the time, but when is it read formally as part of the... We read it, again, traditionally Friday night. When is the common custom of Am Yisrael to read Shir HaShirim on an annual basis? Pesach, Shabbat of Pesach during the day. Ruth, Megillat Ruth is read when? Shavuot during the day. Kohelet? Sukkot during the day. How about Eicha? At night. It's important to note that there is no mention in the Talmud anywhere of a law or even a custom of reading Eicha on Tisha B'Av. It starts afterwards. Same thing with the other Megillot, except, of course, for Esther. And when the custom of reading Eicha began, evidently during the times of the Gaonim, there were 2 different customs. There was one custom to read Eicha after Kriyat HaTorah in the morning. Unlike our Megillot, which we read before Kriyat HaTorah, to read it after Kriyat HaTorah. And the idea is when you're fully invested in the morning, you've already been fasting for over 12 hours. You're into it. Then you read Eicha. What was the other custom? You can guess because it's the one we do. To read it at night. We don't even read it during the day. We read it at night at the very beginning of the day. Why? I believe the answer to that lies in understanding what the last perek and the function of the last perek is. I want to roll us back to an event that takes place in 2 different events that take place in Bereshit, both within the Yosef narrative. What happens when Yaakov, who has sent Yosef on this very bizarre mission to go visit his brothers and see how they're doing, receives a package of Yosef's coat with the blood on it? What's his reaction? Good, you're telling me what he says. What's his reaction? The answer is he goes out of his mind. He goes out of his mind. He's out of his mind with grief. And if you look carefully at the rest of the perakim, you will see that Yaakov becomes a bit of an object in the story and less of a subject. The brothers try to figure out how to manipulate him. Reuven, Yehuda successfully, Reuven not successfully, and therein lies a whole other story. What has happened to Yaakov? Yaakov has been given a shock, a trauma, and he doesn't know how to respond. He can't respond. Vayakumu chol banav v'chol benotav l'nachamo, and vayima'ein l'hitnachem. He refuses to be comforted. He's been slapped, and he can't recover. There's a model for this in Safrut HaChochmah, in our wisdom literature. There's a fellow who, whether he ever lived or not, is subject to dispute. So you all know who I'm maybe not talking about, which is Eov. When Eov has all of these terrible catastrophes hit him, and this formerly wealthy man with 10 kids and all of this power is sitting on the ground, scraping his boils off with a shard of pottery. And he has his 3 friends come to visit him, who will then become the focus of most of the book, their dialogue. What happens when they first arrive? And we learn a halakha from this. What happens when they first arrive? They sit down. For how long? 7 days. And what conversation goes on during the 7 days? Nothing. Then, Vayiftach Eov. And Perek Gimel begins, and that's where the book really gets cooking. And he curses the day he was born and the night he was conceived, and it's all very lively. Why? And by the way, what halakha do we learn from that narrative? Exactly. Very good. When you come to an avel, you sit there silently. And you wait to see what they're going to say. Maybe they want to be silent. Maybe they want to pull out pictures of their father playing baseball with him. Maybe they want to tell stories of their great-great-grandparents that they heard from their father. Maybe they want to talk about something else. And it's their right to direct the discussion. Correct. But there's silence for 7 days. This is echoed in a traumatic moment that we spoke about yesterday at Sudah Shlishit. When Aharon sees his 2 sons killed in front of him. What's his reaction? Vayidom Aharon. Which according to almost every reading is he's absolutely silent. Because that's what happens when you're shocked. There's silence. When are we able to speak? So I'm going to give you an example of something from a much milder kind of occurrence. Just a selection of 2 Pirkei Tehillim that are very well known to you. If you have a Tanakh, you can open them. One is Tehillim Lamed, the other, just for convenience, is Kuf Lamed, just for fun. Tehillim Lamed, which we're all familiar with, Arumcha Adonai ki dilitani v'lo simachta oivai li, Adonai Elohai shivati elecha v'tirpa'eni, is being spoken by someone who has undergone what? A medical emergency, a near-death experience. And God saved him. Shivati elecha. But where is this person standing when he or she is saying this praise? It's Tehillim. So where is he? He's in the Mikdash. Why is he in the Mikdash? Because he's brought a korban todah. He's brought this huge korban, and everybody says to him, "Why are you here?" He says, "Let me tell you. I was this close to death, and God saved me. And now I can tell you about it. Why can I tell you about it now? Because I've recovered. I've had time to think about it. I'm here to celebrate. I've got perspective on it, and now I can tell you what I was going through. Kuf Lamed. Mi ma'amakim karaticha Adonai. When we read this perek, which we read often in all sorts of circumstances, we somehow imagine the petitioner as being in the depths crying out. That's not what it says. Mima'amakim kiraticha means, when I was in the depths I called to you, but I'm not in the depths now. Now I'm telling my audience about what happened back then. I called out to Hashem. Adonai shim'a v'koli ti'ano znecha kol shavot l'kol tachnai. We're not going to go into the parshanut of that perek right now. But the petitioner is sharing with his audience, this is what I said back then when I was in trouble. I begged God to save me. How do I know he's talking to an audience? Because he turns to them and says, Yachel Yisrael, you guys should also pray to God. When do we have the ability to wrap our minds around the experience? Perspective. With time. Let's look at Megillat Eichah. You don't have all of Megillat Eichah in front of you. If you have a Tanakh, certainly welcome to open it up. But you have on page 1, perek. One of the advantages of giving a shiur on the fast days, you don't have any food to throw. Yesterday, for those of you who were at the first shiur, I was afraid my suit was going to have tomatoes on it. But nonetheless, I'll still couch this statement with Chazal. Famous sugya in the beginning of, towards the end of the first perek of Bava Batra, the sugya about Sidrei Aktuvim and Mechabrei Aktuvim, the proper order of the books of Tanakh, and more critically, Mi Amaran, who is the author of each book of Tanakh. So yesterday we spoke about Moshe and Parshat Bilam, why Parshat Bilam is separate. Who wrote Eicha? And by the way, what do Chazal call Eicha? They don't call it Eicha. Eicha is a modern name. What do they call it? They call it Kinot, which we're going to touch into. And no, that does not make me the keynote speaker. Okay. Just got to get rid of that. Who wrote Eicha? Yirmiyahu. Who wrote Yehoshua? Well, the answer is Yehoshua. You're right. That was not like, the Grant's Tomb thing. Right? So Yehoshua wrote Yehoshua, except for one problem is what happens at the end of Yehoshua? He dies and he's buried. Chazal do not suggest that Yehoshua wrote the end of Yehoshua b'dema, as Rabbi Shimon suggests about Moshe. Chazal are willing to say Yehoshua was written by Yehoshua till near the end. And the end was written by whom? Elazar. Elazar died. Okay, Pinchas wrote the last pasuk. How about Sefer Shmuel? This is a lot of fun. Who wrote Sefer Shmuel? Shmuel died in the middle. So the answer is that the Baalat Ov in Ein Dor called him up to finish the book. Good. You can't do this with an Ashkenaz audience. They don't get it. They don't have enough Bikiyut in Tanakh. Good. That's on film, too. Who finished Sefer Shmuel? Because Shmuel, after all, dies in perek Chafei of what we call Shmuel Aleph. So, Gad HaChozev and Natan HaNavi. Other Nevi'im finished it. In other words, even though we assign authorship of a book to a particular Navi, doesn't mean that Navi wrote every sentence in the Sefer. Two examples, just from something we spoke about yesterday, of Sfarim and Tanakh, in which there are additions, whole psukim added in, clearly generations after the original Sefer was written. One of them in Megillat Ruth, the addition about the shoe and the custom of the shoe is clearly added in at a time when nobody even remembers using a shoe to make a deal. And in Sefer Shmuel, perek tet, where there's an indication that in the old days they used to call a navi a ro'eh to explain why the fellow says, let's go to the ro'eh. Where's the ro'eh? I'm the ro'eh. And so you should understand that this pasuk is plugged in. So to say that there are later additions to books of Tanakh is nothing new. Chazal are familiar with this. The question is, who wrote Megillat Eichah? Why do we think that Yirmiyahu wrote Megillat Eichah? We have two big reasons to think it. One is, who else? You got this great Navi, who, as we heard in a beautiful shiur now from my friend Shani Tarragon, who is the one true Navi at the time of the Churban, and Eicha is written from the perspective of an eyewitness seeing the Churban happen. So who else wrote it? But there's a much stronger proof. The third chapter of Megillat Eichah is an autobiographical sketch. Ani HaGever. And unlike perakim Aleph, Bet, and Daled, that hop back and forth between the observer and the city speaking, this is all in the first person, painful. I have gone through terrible things, and the things that are described there from this person's vantage point match perfectly with the events in Yirmiyahu's life. Being thrown into a dark place. And why is it there? It's there because he's trying to get everyone around him to adopt the position he took during his own personal affliction of reaching out to Hashem, looking inwards for his own role in the tragedy that has befallen, and to reach out to God. As an aside, but an important aside because it comes really to what we're talking about. What is the job of a menachem avelim? I assume that all of us here have participated in that mitzvah sometime in the last couple years. Hopefully it becomes less frequent, but never seems to stop. What's our job when we go to be menachem avelim? We said one thing is to sit quietly and wait for them to open up. And then what? What are we supposed to be doing? At what point do you say when you leave, I accomplished my goal? At what point might you say, I didn't do what I was supposed to do? How do you measure it? Certainly no one here could think that the goal is to go to the house, be there for 5 minutes and leave, and whatever happens, happens. Doesn't matter. What's your role? What are you supposed to be doing? Anybody? Comforting. How? How? What? So you're very present. So if you walk in and sit there for a few minutes and you could see that by your coming, it really matters to somebody. You come from out of town. You come in the middle of a busy day. You come and clearly put aside something else to show how important it was to come. That itself may be comfort, correct. There's a lot of modes to comfort, and a lot of it depends on how close you are with the person, how well you know the person, how well maybe you knew the person that passed away. There's all sorts of modes in which it works. One thing that as we get older, we go through our own avelut, we learn is that part of Nichum Avelim is not just the notion of sharing, which is what we say, Hamakom Yanachem Etchem Betoch Shar Velitzion. You're not alone. But also, when appropriate, sharing of experience. when appropriate, and of saying, in the right setting, this is something that I went through also, which opens up some very important doors. It first of all lets them know they're not alone in having gone through that particular kind of experience. And it also lets them know that there's somebody that they can call or talk to when they're confused about their own feelings. It's a way of reaching out. And I believe that that's what Yirmiyahu does in Perek Gimel. But if you look through Megillat Eichah, you will see that very little and really negligible are the calls of the people or of the city calling out. The entire 4 chapters, and I'm calling them 4, I'll tell you why. The entire 4 chapters of Megillat Eichah are chapters of shock. Chapters 1, 2, and 3, which are written in, as Dr. Ziegler explained, Kinam meter. If you weren't here for her wonderful presentation, Kinam meter is a meter of poetry in which the 2 halves of the pasuk are imbalanced. She suggested what a professor who observed this in the 1800s interpreted this. I have a different interpretation on it, which is that the imbalance reflects the fact that our world is imbalanced. Things are out of whack. You have 3 syllables and 1 syllable. It's a sense that things are not the way they're supposed to be. But Eicha, perek aleph, Eicha, perek bet, and we'll look at the general content of those perakim, and Eicha, perek daled. How could this be? The theology of Eicha, bet, and daled are overwhelmingly anger, disbelief, with no constructive place to go. And Perek Gimel, which sits where it sits, is an attempt by the Mikonen, the author, the dirger, if you will, to try to stir the audience, to try to get them off of their seats, on their feet, active, moving towards something better. And it doesn't work. Please take a look at the handout. We'll take a look at Perek Hey. And you'll see immediately that, I believe, it is fairly clear that we are no longer hearing Yirmiyahu. Zechor Adonai mehaya lanu, habita u'rei et cherpatenu. Who's speaking? Who's speaking? Sounds like the people are speaking. And who are they speaking to? Hashem. First time we're hearing this. Besides the little bit, Re'eh Hashem v'habita, that we get in Perek Aleph, Bet, and Daled. Little spurts here and there of crying out to Hashem. Here it's full-throated. I'll tell you further why I don't think that this is the voice of Yirmiyahu anymore. Nachlatenu nehefcha lezarim. What does that mean? Just a simple translation. You got the English underneath. Nachlatenu nehefcha lezarim. What does that mean? Our inheritance is now owned by others. Batenu ledochrim. Our houses are lived in by other people. Other people have taken over our houses. As an aside, but an important aside that is actually part and parcel of what I'm presenting today. Eicha is about the destruction of Yerushalayim at the end of the 6th century BCE, beginning of the 6th century BCE. Eicha is one of the most beautiful books in Tanakh. pain is often the source of great creativity. Yesterday I mentioned one of the shiurim that Midrashei Chazal pick up their style, their theme, their nuance from the Mikra. So as an example, many of the Midrashim in Bereshit highlight what is a theme in the Mikra of Bereshit, which is Midah Keneged Midah. Some of the most beautiful Midrashim that we have about Tefillah are Dafka in Vayikra Rabbah. Because Vayikra is about Korban, about coming close to Hashem. Some of the funniest Midrashim you could imagine are in Esther Rabbah. Well, why not? Megillat Esther is funny. And perhaps the most beautiful collection of Midrashim that we have, maybe the most beautiful collection in any of our literature, of anything, is Eicha Rabbah. Megillat Eichah is about Churban Yerushalayim by the Babylonians. Eicha Rabbah is about the destruction of Yerushalayim and perhaps more poignantly, the destruction of Beitar. From perspective of immediacy all the way to several hundred years. Takes the psukim in Eicha and reads them as being about their own events. B'nai Tzion ha'metzulaim b'paz, says Yirmiyahu in Perek Daled. The young men of Tzion who wear this beautiful gold clothes. And then the Midrash tells the story about famous parties that people used to put on just before the destruction of the second Mikdash. It applies them. I read Pasuk Bet, and I'm reminded of those Jews who less than 100 years ago were marched out of their houses, brought together to the city square, and marched to a train station. And the few who survived the labor camps, survived the death camps, survived the death march, and after all of that came back to see what was left and found that their neighbors were now living in their homes. Nachlatenu nefcha lezarim batenu lenochrim. Just imagine. Yitomim hayinu ve'ein av imotenu ka'almanot. We are orphans. Our fathers are dead. Who is saying this? I know it's Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael when? Read the tense. Meimenu b'chesef shatinu. Our own water we have to pay for. Eitzenu mechir yavo. We want to get our own wood from our own field. We have to pay for it. What? Except, where are they? They're looking at their own houses, but their own houses are lived in by other people and they have to spend money to buy stuff from their own field. So they're in the area, but when? What? When is this? This is the next generation. This is when these events have already become part of the new reality. And we continue. Mitzrayim natanu yad, Ashur lisbo alachem. And this is throughout the Megillah. This is our failing. That we thought that we had an alliance with Egypt. And we signed an alliance with Egypt. And that's what set the Babylonians against us. We assumed we would get help from there. Avutenu chatu ve'inam. And now you see when this is. V'anachnu avonoteihem savalnu. And this is a direct attack on Yechezkel. Because what is it that Yechezkel is broadcasting in Bavel at this time? And Yirmiyahu is sort of echoing? Od lo yomru hamashal hazeh b'Yisrael. They won't say this mashal anymore, which is avot achlu voser v'shinei vanim tikana. The fathers eat sour grapes and the kids' teeth are set on edge. In other words, children suffer for their parents' sin. Yechezkel says that's no longer the way it's going to be. Everybody is accountable for themselves. And here, what do we say? Avotenu chat'u ve'enam v'anachnu avonotehem savalnu. Bottom line, our parents sinned. They're no longer around. They were killed. We're orphans. But we're suffering. Why are we suffering? Because reality is the Mikdash is destroyed. Reality was Yerushalayim is destroyed. Reality was our land was taken over. And now here we are. This still is hopeless. And we're not done with hopeless. We're still in the middle of hopeless. Avadim mashluvanu, perek en miadam. We are nobility. And now we are subservient to slaves. Nobody's going to redeem us. Benafshenu navi lachmenu. And notice lachmenu. It's as if it's our own bread. We have to do it with our own life. Get it with our own life. Necherev amidbar. Oreinu ketanur nichmarum nezilafot rav. And we are so destroyed by hunger, our skin has turned black. Nashim mitzion inu, and now we're going backwards. We're going to see in a minute what the significance of this order is. Women were abused, were violated in Sion, betulot barei Yehuda. Sarim biadam nitlu pnei zekenim lo nedaru. The elders, the leaders, were all disgraced publicly. Bachurim tachon nasau, u'na'arim ba'etz kashalu. The young men are doing this arduous physical labor. This is the new reality. Part of it is this is what happened, and now this is where we are. If we stop at this point, there is no hope. If we stop at this point, there's nothing for us to say. Because all we're doing is seemingly continuing what it says in Eicha, the next generation. Zekenim mishar shavatu bachurim medinatam. Which, if you think about it, is a little bit of a strange thing to say. We're talking about people being violated, being killed, dying of hunger. Then people having to do very difficult manual labor. And then the elders are no longer sitting at the gates. The young men are no longer at their festive parties. Shavat mesos libenu nepach le'eva mecholenu. All of our celebrations have turned into mourning, into dirges. But we seem to be going backwards. Instead of describing a lessening of celebration and then hard work all the way down to death, we went in the opposite direction. Perek Pasuk Tet Zayin is where things move, where we need them to move. And again, do you realize that this is not Yirmiyahu? You realize this is not Yirmiyahu's generation anymore. This is a generation that has already seen the final result of the Churban. Nafla ateret roshenu. When whether ateret roshenu is a reference to the monarchy or to the Mikdash, it has fallen. Oina lanu ki chatanu. And finally, we open up our mouth and say, we have sinned. Just a few psukim earlier, what do we say? Our fathers sinned, and we're suffering. So what happened in the meantime? How do we suddenly come to a realization? We have sinned. We're culpable also. Al zeh hayad daver libenu, al eila chashchu einenu. There is in this pasuk a delicious ambiguity. What does the word zeh, or in the plural, eila, refer to? Or something we're about to speak about. It's a beautiful hinge. They can pivot either way. Everything that we have described till now, the terrible pain that we're undergoing, the loss, looking at our former houses that are now occupied by these people who are ruling over us. Or perhaps what we're about to describe. Al har Tzion shamem shualim hilchuvo. That Har Tzion is desolate. That foxes walk there. And then somehow, and we'll have to figure out how, somehow the people, in their cries, under the leadership of a Navi, and we'll see who it perhaps might be, turn around with a sound of confidence. Ata Adonai le'olam teshev. What does that mean? What does that mean? Kisacha ledor vador. This pasuk fits here like, it's not even a square peg in a round hole. It's a square peg in a soft banana. It doesn't fit at all. Sorry, not nice on a fast day to mention banana. But what is this pasuk doing here? Go ahead, say. Very good. And so what's the statement? Ata Adonai le'olam teshev. But that's not what it says. Le'olam teshev is not about what we're going to do. What? What was our sense till now? And as a result of that, so's he. So's he. You're right. Up until now, there has been an overwhelming sense of grief and trauma. Hashem has turned away from us. Hashem has been defeated, as it were. Has defeated us, and that's his own defeat. And now we're turning around and saying, Hashem, please, see where we're at. See what the reality is here. And then a new understanding sneaks in, which is, Ata Adonai le'olam teshev. Kisacha ledor vador. Where is Kisacha, by the way? Look at the previous pasuk. Al har Tzion sheshamem. We see Har Tzion sheshamem. From your perspective, it is le'olam teshev. Kisacha ledor vador. Which means now, instead of the dissonance between what we believed about HaKadosh Baruch Hu and about ourselves, and the new reality which shatters all of that. Because remember, what do we believe about ourselves up until the Churban? What was everybody saying during the time of Yirmiyahu? HaKadosh Baruch Hu will never destroy his own house. Look at Yirmiyahu Zion. And suddenly there's dissonance. Everything has come crumbling down. And now the dissonance is different. The dissonance is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you are indeed forever. Look at the next pasuk. Lama lanetzach tishkachenu, ta'azvenu la'orech yamim. And ta'azvenu la'orech yamim can't be said in the generation of Yirmiyahu. You can't say in the aftermath of the Churban, orech yamim. Can only be said at least a generation later. So if you indeed are Kisacha ledor vador, why ta'azvenu? And what's the answer to that? The answer to that is Oyna lanu ki chatanu. The dissonance is created by our own behavior. And therefore, what do we beg of God in the next pasuk? Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva. Who says words like that? Hashiveni ve'ashuva. Somebody who's very weak. Somebody who's got no power. Somebody who's got no energy. I can't do it myself. And so I'm begging you, you Hashem, you bring me back, and I'll come back. Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem means set things the way that they were before. Where all is right in the world. Where Kisacha L'dor Vador and Zachartanu L'orach Yamim. And it ends on this very sour note. Ki ma'os me'astanu katzavta aleinu ad me'od. The key is rather. This is what the reality is. The reality is you've rejected us. You're very angry at us. Okay, so we got the picture. We had 4 chapters of describing trauma. 1, 2, and 4 from the perspective of the observer and the perspective of the city. A dialogue back and forth. In the middle, chapter 3, Yirmiyahu doing his best with his own personal experience to spur the people to get here, and they never get here. They never get here. And Eicha properly ends at the end of perek Dalet. And then, a generation later, maybe 2, there are people who perhaps never left, or perhaps who returned. And they see what they see. And they see that the enemy controls. Now the reality is, 2 generations later, it's no longer an enemy. But their homes are gone. They now have to pay for that which was theirs. And there is a conflation of the past and the present in this perek, describing the terrors of the behavior of the enemy in Yerushalayim, along with the present reality of what we see in front of us. And the former perspective that everything has come cascading down and there's nowhere for us to go is now replaced with a whole different dissonance. A disconnect. You, Hashem, are forever. What about us? We have to figure out where this is coming and where this is leading us. I want to point out, if you look at the bottom of page 1, there's a midrash, among the very famous midrashim that talk about the structure of Eicha. A midrash that connects us to the Tochachan B'chukotai, where the number 7 is an oft-repeated trope. Sheva al chatoteichem. Pinchas patach, v'imar ele lo tishma'u li, etc. And this is pticha for Eicha, meaning when he would get up before the public reading of Eicha, this is how he would introduce it. And he would say, Atem avartem lefanai sheva averot. Unclear what the sheva averot are. Hare Yirmiyahu ba u'mekonen alechem kinot shu sheva alpha beitin. So this midrash makes the claim that there are 7 alphabetic acrostics in Eicha. Now what are they? What are the 7 alphabetic acrostics in Eicha? So perek Aleph, perek Bet. We have to talk for a moment just for fun about the problem of perek Bet and on. Good. Perek Gimel, perek Gimel, perek Gimel. Good. Perek Daled. Whoops, that's it. We got a problem. Interesting. How many psukim are there in perek Hey? 22. Aha. So we don't really have an acrostic, but we have the same number as the alphabet. Interesting. Turn the page a second. I want to show you something just curious, but it may be more than curious. Years ago, I was leafing through at UCLA in the library, which happens to have a great collection. I was leafing through an old edition of Sinai and found one of those one-page, I think they call them zutot. It's like little, how would you call it zutot? Like a little one, that's not even an article. It's like, we would call it a vort, but you can't call it a vort in academia, so. What? No, a blurb, I guess a blurb. It's a one-page thing by Israel Rosenfeld in which he suggested that there really is an acrostic in the fifth perek. Actually, well, you take a look at the bottom, or if you want to take a look in the text itself. How does the fifth perek begin? Zachor Hashem. So he claims that Zachor Hashem is just another way of writing the word Zachariah. That should not be too strange to you, because are we familiar with alphabetic acrostics? We're familiar with. We see it in Eicha, Ashrei Tamei Derech. Are we familiar with other kind of acrostics that we have in our tefillot or in our zmirot, for instance? We certainly are. And what is the acrostic usually in a zemer? It's what we call a colophon. A colophon is a signature of the author. He puts his name in there, right? The Arizal has several of them, right? But we have a number of these colophonic acrostics. So he claims that's what we have here. Take a look at the psukim. Zachor Hashem mehayalanu. And then looking at every half pasuk, Habita, Nachlatenu, Batenu, Yitomim, and Imotenu, spell out Zechariah HaNavi. It's cute. I'm not going to give it more than cute. Only gets about a 6 on the reality check. But there's something else to take into account that makes it a very strong candidate. Who is Zechariah HaNavi? And your proper answer to that question should be, which one do you mean? So, I mean, who is the Zechariah HaNavi who could potentially be the author of this perek? So if you open up the Sefer Ezra, perek, you will see that in the rebuilding of the Mikdash, which, as you know, Bnei Yisrael returned to Bavel, or returned to Eretz Yisrael from Bavel under Koresh, and were given permission to build the Mikdash, and built the foundation and the Mizbeach, and then were stopped. Evidently because of their interaction with the Shomronim and some Lashon Hara, whatever it is. It was sieged for roughly 18 years or so. Finally, in the second year of Daryavesh, which is Koresh, Kambisis, and then Daryavesh, in the second year of Daryavesh, a letter is sent to Daryavesh saying the Jews had permission to build the Mikdash. Daryavesh then issues an edict, and Jews are allowed to build. Anybody who gets in the way of it will be impaled on a tree in his own backyard. Take you back to Megillat Esther, and that's the rule. In the first two psukim of perek of Ezra, we're told that there were two Nevi'im who support the building of the Mikdash. Who are they? Chagai Hanavi and Zechariah ben Iddo ben Berachia Hanavi. They are the ones who support the building of the Mikdash. What do they do to support the building of the Mikdash? So if you look in the very short Sefer of Nevuot Chagai, you will see that he pushes and pressures the people to go build the Mikdash. And tells them they should not be afraid of the fact that the Mikdash seems to be very weak relative to the previous one. It's Gadol, Kavod, Yeh Kvod Habayit Hazacharon, Min HaRishon, it's going to even be greater. Uvao Chemdat Kol HaGoyim, all of the great riches are going to come here. But what is it Zechariah does to support the building of the Mikdash? Doesn't seem to do anything. What?
Locates the proper places in the
Even that, unclear. Zechariah has a whole series of nivuot, which seem to promote the idea of power coming into Yerushalayim and evil leaving Yerushalayim, but very unclear. He himself doesn't even get half of his nivuot. He needs a malach hadoverbi to explain it. And then when the agents come to ask whether they should continue to fast and mourn during the 5th month, he spends 2 perakim not answering the question. He does answer the question. What does he do to support it? I'd like to suggest that perhaps this is where Zechariah is supporting it. Supporting the rebuilding starts with accountability for the destruction, awareness that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has not abandoned us and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is here forever, and that the doors of tshuva are open. And we're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu to take us back. A fellow recently wrote an article in which he suggested that the end of the perek may also form an acrostic in which it spells out Elohach Ram Me'od. This is a little bit more far-fetched, but it actually fits very well with the theme. So even if it's not true in the acrostic, it's true in the theme. Is that the shift that has happened here is that now with the safety of distance, with the healing that comes with a little bit of time after the shock, there is room for Am Yisrael collectively to understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu is great. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is our God and loves us. Which means there is a return possible, there is a return destined, and it's in our hands to do. The entire secret of the fifth perek is that of distance, of gaining perspective and distance from the first four perakim, from the events of the Churban themselves, from the terror of seeing little children screaming out to their mothers for food and their mothers have nothing to give them, and their children dying in their mother's arms. To have to turn around and say, Tovim hayu chalei cher michalei ra'av. Better to die by the sword than to die by hunger. Imagine how terrifying it is to have that choice and make that choice, of which is a better way to die. When you're in trauma, you can't get perspective. And it's interesting that there is no demand of tshuva put on the people at that point, because you can't make that demand. The best there is an attempt by Yirmiyahu to lead by example. You take a look at page 2 for a moment, and you will see how perek very much speaks to the rest of Megillat Eichah. If you take a look at on page 2, on the right-hand side on top, very, very quick summary of the first perek. The first perek is a description of the fall of the city. It is from the perspective of the city speaking and of the Makonen, the observer, Yirmiyahu, describing. The second perek seems to describe God as being angry at his people, shooting arrows at his people, taking aim at his people. And it describes in far greater detail the pain and the suffering that we went through. Again, perek Gimel sits by itself. When a perek Daled, the terrible pain that we've experienced is even heightened. Parenthetically, there is a call in Eicha, but the call in Eicha is not necessarily a call for tshuva in the perakim 1, 2, and 4, but rather a call for vengeance. Look at the end of perek Daled, and the vengeance against Edom, against Pavel. One note in perakim 1, 2, and 4, because we're going to leave them now, is that the acrostic in those perakim, in Bet and the 3 times in Gimel and in Daled, violates our normal alphabetic sequence. Anybody know how that is? What's the violation? Right. So it's interesting is that in our perek, in perek A, ayin is actually the only letter that's sitting in the right place. But we have this order which is normally in our alphabet, mem, nun, samach, ayin, pei. In perek Bet, Gimel, and Daled, it's all mem, nun, samach, pei, ayin. The Midrash is very aware of this. And the Midrash makes the following comment. It says that, after all, where is all of the suffering that Eicha is describing? What event is it anchored in? So as an aside, Chazal have a general hashkafa of identifying all moments in Jewish history. All moments in Jewish history from Avraham's time all the way till Mashiach as being anchored in events in Yetziat Mitzrayim. Hence you find so many mentions of Pesach in the Avraham Midrashim. And you have that famous Mishnah that associates the 5 terrible things that happened yesterday on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, that the first of those 5 things was the breaking of the Luchot because of the Egel. And then Chazal go through all sorts of interesting working with the psukim to have it come out that Moshe Rabbeinu comes down on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. And what are the 5 terrible things that happened on Tisha B'Av according to Chazal? So Beitar, the 2 Mikdashim, the clear cutting of Yerushalayim. What's number 1? The onesh of what we call Chet HaMeraglim. Chazal again have a deliberate hashkafa to anchor all major events in Jewish history in the period that we refer to as Yetziat Mitzrayim, which is from basically Makat Bechorot all the way to entering the land. And therefore they look at Eicha and they see Eicha as the result of Chet HaMeraglim. And what was it the Meraglim did so bad? So the Midrash says, Shamru b'fihem ma shelo ra'u b'einam. They spoke and said things that they never saw. They lied, and they described things that they never saw. And because they put their peh before their ayin, therefore the order in Eicha is switched to peh and ayin. Now, a little bit of reality, just to point it out, is that we have lots of evidence from the period of Yirmiyahu, even afterwards, but certainly before, that the order of the alphabet wasn't so set literally in stone, and that we have writing exercises of students in which peh and ayin is reversed. On that, we have writing exercises where they're writing from left to right, and all sorts of other interesting permutations. But it's an interesting observation about those perakim. Take a look at how our perek then begins. It starts with a description of how our land has been taken over by others, echoing what is described in Perek Aleph. We are orphans and our mothers are widows, echoing the killing of the leaders in Perek Bet. And now we are starving and we are thirsty, echoing the suffering that's described in Perek Daled. We continue with that theme and we go backwards through Pasuk Hey, Vav, and Zayin. And then there's a whole section that describes in greater detail the terrible pain that's described in Perek Daled. We then move to talk about the violation of the elite and the violation of the people that was described in Perek Bet. And ultimately we come down to the destruction of the city, which is Perek Aleph. Why is this significant? Because Perek Hey is not turning its back on Perek Aleph through Daled. Perek Hey is not turning around and saying, we got a new idea. Perek Hey is the people turning around and saying, what they described, what Yirmiyahu described, what they saw was the shock. Was the American soldiers who discovered Buchenwald. You don't have words there. All you can do is just take a picture or record what you see. You cannot give expression to that. What we are going to do, the first step that we need to take to rebuild, is to take the shock that they experienced and give it feeling. To take the terror of the streets of Yerushalayim and put it into a context that ultimately leads to tshuva. Perek Hey is the permission to lament, because Perek Hey is the key. How to take the terrifying events described in Aleph, Bet, and Daled and to give them form. You'll notice, I'm not sure in different communities how it works. I know that in our community, the keynote that we recite immediately after Eicha are all parroting Perek Hey. Zachor Hashem mehayalanu, Zachor Hashem mehayalanu. Because Perek Hey is the permission to lament. Perek Hey is the guide to lament. Perek helps us take the terrible pain and suffering that we have seen, that our parents have seen, and to give it a form, but most critically, to give it direction towards ultimately rebuilding. Everybody should have an easy, meaningful fast.